Welcome back, everyone. I'd like to welcome our friends from the OpenID Foundation who are going to kick off this afternoon's sessions. As a reminder, those who are remote, please do submit any questions you have through the Q&A in the app. And with that, I'd like to introduce Gail and Anoop, who will be presenting next. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Christina, for the warm introduction, and it's great to be friends and partners with the FIDO Alliance. And we are having this talk today, and then tomorrow morning we'll have a group of plenary sessions from 9 to 12:30. We'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow, but look out on your calendars for the plenary sessions tomorrow for some more deep dives. So our main goal for today was to win the award for the longest session title. And I think we are just about ready to get that gold star from Christina at the end of this presentation. My name's Gail Hodges. I'm the executive director of the OpenID Foundation, and I'll be joined by Anup Saxena, who's going to be speaking about FAPI, open banking, and open data, and the global movement on that initiative. So very excited to share an overview of the foundation's work and then dive deep into FAPI. So for those of you who are less familiar with the OpenID Foundation, we are a nonprofit open standards body. And we are well known for having APIs in the identity layer that are interoperable, extensible, agile, and well-maintained. And we were founded in 2007. And in that time, since we were first founded, we now have deployments with over 3 billion users and millions of applications, predominantly using OpenID Connect, but progressively many of our other family of standards, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, including, of course, open banking, open data, and the FAPI standard. Some of the things that are particularly unique about us is that there's no cost to contribute, to take part in the development of our standards. It's really low cost to be a member, so if you wish to be voting on our standards, it costs as little as $50 for the individual, and it ladders up by the scale of the organization. And we seek to offer incredibly low-cost, accessible certifications, so anyone globally can certify to our standards. And that really feeds into our ethos as an open organization. And that's made possible by many of our members, including, of course, a lot of brand name organizations as sustaining members, a lot of nonprofit members, including key government stakeholders, and a wide range of corporate and private individuals. We're comprised and funded by about a third membership, a third certification income, and a third directed funds, which is a privilege of members to help direct investment to initiatives that support the community as a whole. And so I thought I'd take a little bit of a step back and into the minds of some of our board members. About a year ago, we were thinking about the strategic direction of the foundation and where we needed to really invest our time. And so, of course, we paused and we took the step back and we looked at all of the trends that were kind of cascading around the identity landscape. And as we did that, some of the usual suspects came up: mobile as an enabler, the movement of open banking to open data, but a lot of the other kind of pervasive challenges that were sitting underneath of that. So identity foundations, what governments, what society needed as core identity infrastructure to unleash their economies and empower their residents. What was happening with the convergence between the digital domain for identity and the physical domain for identity. So government-issued IDs versus these online sign in with Google, sign in with Apple, those types of services. And of course, a lot of legislative action around this space of identity and privacy in a more general sense, whether it was GDPR or CCPA and the tendrils of much more of that movement expected to come. And we also, from our vantage point as identirati and identity experts, could see so much of the vertical convergence. What one might see within the enclave identity or the enclave of security was being echoed in finance, was being echoed, again, in healthcare, was being echoed with the telecom community and other spheres as well. So we saw that vertical convergence, and a lot of things were rhyming, all looking the same. And then we saw some of the really painful challenges of COVID coming upon us and the challenges of identity infrastructure, making testing and vaccination distribution intrinsically challenging in virtually every country in the world, the issues with browsers and redirects, creating a primitive problem at that redirect level for both SAML and OpenID, the OpenID Foundation. And then, of course, cyber war from earlier this year as we were first seeing the ripple effects of the Ukrainian war and what was happening in the online digital environment on both sides. And so our minds were a little bit blown, probably a little bit like your own, when we look at all of that shifting landscape. And the read was that no one organization, no one nonprofit, no one government, no one human being could possibly hold all of that complexity in their mind and solve the kinds of problems that we saw emerging. And so I'll share a little analogy I gave at Identiverse, and I'm a geek, so I watch a lot of nature programs. And I was particularly struck by the Wood Wide Web, if you haven't stumbled across this one in the past. The mycorrhizal networks, which connect the trees across different species, are kind of the funguses that connect and exchange carbon and nutrients and even risk signals. And apparently the trees are even talking to each other. It's really some extraordinary science. But the analogy there is what we as the OpenID Foundation are doing. We provide the standards, the protocols that enable interoperability between different kinds of networks, including some networks that may use our standards and some that don't. As long as you can have the interfaces across those communities, this is really our superpower and what we focused on for the last 15 years. So maybe we have something to learn from the trees, even if they're borrowing something from the internet around us. So the really big idea, which the board was dwelling on, was that we see all this rhyming of similar challenges across these different spheres, right? Open banking and open data, that moving into open health, the movement of medical records, the desire for consent-based movement of data, often from a regulatory top-down perspective, connections of identity networks, sometimes privately led, and then sometimes cross-organization led, sometimes cross-country led, government infrastructure and the need to be both the issuer of identity credentials, the consumer of identity credentials, and of course the regulator of identity credentials across all those spheres, and IoT, that next kind of frontier of looking at the person identity connected with the identity of things. And another one that's not even on here, but which I was listening to one of the Web3 presentations yesterday, one can say all of these problems are not going to magically be solved when we move into completely new environments, right? If we haven't really solved some of them now, I think it's intrinsically challenging to solve them in the future. So the board stepped back and said, well, what really should be our vision and our mission as an organization to help address these questions in this moment? And so that led us to think very carefully about each word on the page there. We really want to help people assert their identity wherever they choose, and that's on a global basis, and lead the global community in creating identity standards that are secure, interoperable, and privacy preserving. That's a huge ambition, both of them, huge ambition, but something which we felt we were well placed to do. Again, not the only nonprofit that was going to be in a place to singularly lead all of this, but crucially to be one of the safe spaces that the public and the private sector can come together and have those conversations. Because it's very awkward sometimes for a large digital platform or a small startup to have access to the government and speak frankly about the problems that they're having, and vice versa, for government to truly be up to speed and have a strong bench strength and understand and internalize the moving technologies and how to address them. So we wanted to help fill that gap and make sure that the OpenID Foundation was rising up to the moment and meeting it. And so the tactical things that we wanted to do to help deliver on that mission during the course of 2022, and a lot of this will probably look similar going into 2023, was obviously to keep doubling down on the things we're already doing well and make sure that it's all fit for purpose. So continued development in OpenID Connect. The AB Connect working group is very active. Several specifications have gone to final this year. Drop me a line. We can talk more about specific changes that they're making now. But a lot of activity. It's a very much live and flourishing standard, both for user logins at the user level as well as on the enterprise level. FAPI, I will leave to Anoop to talk about in a few minutes, and he's going to go into some depth, including things like the security analysis that we're conducting and the adoption that we're seeing globally across numerous different markets. And then our certification program, which historically was quite differentiated from the leadership of Don Thibault, my successors and board member sitting in front of me. The concept behind our certification is that it's self-certification. So each organization conducts the certification themselves, and then they send it to the foundation to have it reviewed. So it enables a really low-cost model for how certification can be done. But we were finding some government partners, like the Central Bank of Brazil and the Saudi Monetary Authority, wanted to have more control, a little bit more governance and authority over how something like the open banking or open finance implementation was going to roll out in their jurisdiction. And so we're working through a process of developing a third-party licensing model that would give them the appropriate governance and oversight that's appropriate for them to have, while still leveraging our global standards and a proven certification process, which would drop their costs of maintenance to those standards, and also make sure you're balancing the best of global standards with the domestic governance they need. So we're really excited to work and collaborate on launching that with them over the next year to 2 years. And then a couple of other headlines. So OpenID Connect for Identity Assurance is an exciting new piece of work protocol. It's just been voted and approved for its 4th implementer's draft and on its way to final by the end of this year. And that's a fantastic and innovative standard looking at different kinds of identity information and the policy that was followed in order to develop that information. So whether it's GPG 45 or an 863.3, what is the information and what was the process that was followed? And that's a standard that's underpinning some of the other work in GAIN that I'll talk about in a moment. And then shared signals and events, where we'll do a deep dive on this tomorrow morning in one of our breakout sessions at the plenary, is really about that nervous system. Like we talked about the myocardial networks, and they actually send risk signals between the trees and the plants and the shrubs and across the funguses. This is the equivalent for the identity and network systems, to be able to send shared signals and events between public and private sector entities potentially. It's really innovative, and it's going through just the early stages of its conception and growth now. And then a whole set of other activities, what we need to invest in as an organization, refine our work where we've done some things on health and other areas, and double down in those, and also new opportunities where we need to focus like IoT. So the investing areas like OpenID Connect for verifiable credentials is a really interesting and intriguing piece of work for many, because it's looking at the intersection between OpenID Connect standards and foundation standards with verifiable credential standards alongside ISO 18013-5 family of standards, and how could they be harmonized or run side by side. So you have government stakeholders that need to issue those credentials, looking at this as an interesting way to potentially solve and harmonize across those standards. So Christina Yasuda will go into that in some detail tomorrow morning. And then the Global Assured Identity Network, which was announced last year at the EIC, it was a white paper, originally just a grand idea, which has subsequently been supported by 5 different nonprofit organizations, including the OpenID Foundation, the Open Identity Exchange, the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, the Cloud Signature Consortium, and, I was going to forget one. What am I missing? IIF, the International Institute of Finance. So those 5 organizations are helping to start, nudge this effort to allow individuals and organizations to assert identities cross borders and really streamline and create a mechanism both at a governance level with OIX and at a protocol level with standards from the foundation on how one can actually conduct cross-border transactions in practice and assert them with confidence. So another great piece of work there. We'll talk about more tomorrow morning. And you'll see a couple of stars on the page around government, health, privacy, IoT, FAPI, and open banking. And we've done a series of 7 white papers. 4 are published, and 3 are in flight right now. And those 7 papers are designed to be a lightning rod for the community to try and deeply tackle some of the most intractable problems that we're facing. So I'll jump onto the next page and explain a couple of them. So OpenID for verifiable credentials is a white paper written by 5 of the lead thinkers in the OpenID Connect for verifiable credentials working group. And those 5 lead editors tried to make one white paper to explain some of the core principles within the standards and what were the use cases that they could help unlock. And that has helped galvanize the conversation since particularly IIW last spring, where there were some really interesting thrashing out sessions to try and align key thinkers around what the standard could potentially achieve. And it's really continued to gain momentum. And now we're looking at a situation where that standard is looking quite likely to be incorporated within the ISO 18013-7 standard, subject to successful interoperability tests in Brisbane this December. So a really interesting read if you haven't come across that work yet. And of course, do come and listen to Christina's session tomorrow morning. The Global Open Health Movement is a paper by Deb Bucci, who many of you know is a former government official who's an expert in healthcare standards. And OpenID Connect is already woven into some of the work of HL7 and UDAP, but there's a lot of shifting tides around the world on how to enable open health capabilities in practice. And so we're proud to be contributing to that with some of our standards work, but we want to push the margin and really help see if other standards that we have can add material value and really try and help accelerate the global conversation and help people really have more direct control over their data, both for themselves and who they authorize to have access to that information. So a great piece of work by Deb. The first one is a first editor's draft. I expect it to go to a second. The health paper had its first editor's draft in July, and that's probably going to go to a final over the next month to 2 months. So if you're interested in either of those topics, obviously feel free to reach out to us, director at oidf.org. And on the right-hand side, Anoop's going to talk a little bit about these white papers in a moment. One is a landscape paper on open banking, where he'll give you a little bit of some key themes on that today. And then going into the even more intractable problem, which is the cross-border movement of open data. So right now it's all jurisdiction specific, but there's the possibility for that to turn into cross-border transactions. So we look at what are the use cases, who are the key players who could really move the needle on on cross-border transactions coming into being. That paper will also be updated over the next few weeks, actually. And then there's I think I went the wrong way around. Oh, no, that's all right. I've circled things. So those 5 sessions you see circled: shared signals and events, OpenID Connect for verifiable credentials, GAIN, and listening sessions on a government white paper. How can we communicate the trends in the identity ecosystem? What can we do as a collective public and private sector community to really move the needle on adoption and transformation? And a white paper on privacy, particularly around government-issued identity credentials and the challenges of data minimization and relying party enforcement is a paper that Heather Flanagan is going to lead. Those 5 sessions, including the 2 listening sessions on government and privacy, will be tomorrow morning from 9 till 12:30. So I hope you can make time in your schedules both to come in person or for those of you online to dial in. It's completely free to attend the OpenID Foundation sessions. Just get that Zoom link. Moving on to FAPI and the OIDF certification program. I'll now hand over to you, Anoop, to take everybody through the deep dive.
Thank you. Thank you, Gail. Hello, everyone. I'm Anup Saxena, Principal Engineer at Intuit, also a co-chair of OpenID FAPI working group. I'm also a member of a technical review committee, Financial Data Exchange, which is an open banking in United States. I'll provide a deep overview of, in the context of global open banking and open data movement. So how does the global open data evolution started? It started with private API ecosystem, followed by open banking ecosystem domestically started coming up, with each jurisdiction coming up with their own way of solving for open banking. And then after that, it picked up from a cross-vertical ecosystem, like healthcare and insurance company started coming up along in that. So we'll be looking at what is the next coming up in this evolution. A little bit of an overview of how the open banking data in overall map looks like. You see the darker areas; those are the areas where it's driven by regulatory in the regions. Like you have CMA in UK, Australia in AICC. So those are the drivers of open banking in those regions. And you see the lighter colors there; those are the areas where it's driven by the industry itself, meaning fintech companies and and the banking industry in United States open up a consortium group called Financial Data Exchange, and that's where it's driven by the industry itself. But there is an oversight by the regulators as well in that. So far, FAPI has been very successful in all these areas. So if you see most of on the left-hand side, many from UK, Australia, US, and then initiatives like open banking initiatives. Like in Australia, you have Consumer Data Standards and Financial Data Exchange in US. payments in New Zealand. And then these are regulatory bodies that are kind of contributing or actually adopting that. And there are some countries and regions that are still reviewing it. Japan and are one of them. So what is the role of OpenID Foundation in open data system? Basically, let me explain how the role we play in the open data ecosystem. The role from starting from developing and maintaining global secure standards, and FAPI is one of the example in that specification. So having a specification is one aspect of it, but actually doing a formal security analysis and publishing the paper for everyone to adopt and review, that builds a confidence in the specification itself and the implementation of it. Also, we help government, select a standard selection, where helping with their ecosystem and setup process, and address any region-specific requirement that they have within the jurisdiction. We have one of the best-in-class certification support suite. It's a self-certification process, and I will provide some numbers in the next slides. And also, it also provide, the way we do it is as a role is, we provide a safer environment for folks to come and experiment if they want to. So one such example is you will see GAIN POC or GAIN 2 POCs. Basically, they are more of a global assured identity network. It's not a working group as such in OpenID, but we are providing a forum for folks who are like-minded to come and contribute and come up with some good standards. And GAIN 2 POC is about, when we are looking at different data sets and different individual regions in open banking, how do we align and make sure that we can have a lightweight APIs that we can deliver. So what does a typical open banking ecosystem needs? So if you really see the building blocks in this one is, one is the jurisdiction-specific profile. Of course, we want to minimize as much as possible any customization in jurisdiction. Otherwise, it won't be called standard. So, and then we provide, it needs to have a system registration and discovery, consent management, and enforcement of it. And then non-repudiation framework, security profile, and API specification. So this is what the building blocks or technical building blocks that needed for an ecosystem to work. And this is what the FAPI framework provides it. Starting with support of providing with an implementation advice on the left-hand side, and providing an attacker model validation. And then followed by, in the ecosystem management API for registration and discovery, we provide all the APIs, standard way to allow registration and discovery. And then advanced authorization and which is like RAR and some of the SSE-based signals events that we can capture, and then grant management in that. And in the FAPI advanced profile, we cover the non-repudiation framework that we provide in that. We also have a baseline profile as well, where there are not very, where the use cases does not require a high level of, security. They can still adopt the baseline profile. And the last one, we have API specification. Since in each API specification is within the industry and within the local jurisdiction right now, it's out of the scope for OpenID. So we already have FAPI 1.0 already released as the final version specification. Currently, we are working on FAPI 2.0 that we are going to release this soon. So this is the interesting part of formal security analysis of FAPI. So one of the reason OpenID FAPI adoption is success story is it has a good security analysis done. The FAPI 1.0 security analysis was done, I think it was in 2019. Currently, FAPI 2.0 analysis is going on, and it's helped by University of Stuttgart. and it's in progress with phase 1, phase 2 as work packages. It's co-funded by Australian Data Standard Body, DSB, and of course, OIDF. The way we divided the work is phase 1, we have FAPI 2.0 baseline, and then followed by FAPI 2 message signing, CIBA, and dynamic client registration. And then work package 3 would look like FAPI grant management, security event token, and identity assurance. And for the phase 1, we still, co-funding is always welcome. So the another reason FAPI is so successful is it has a lightweight, a low-cost certification program. To promote the high-quality implementation, it has an exhaustive confirmation suites test that allows implementer to ensure that software is secure and interoperable. So in certain jurisdiction, it is required by the regulated body itself. And in other industry-driven, like financial data exchange, it is desirable or requiring certification to build confidence in implementation. So far, we have about 1,600 plus implemented that shows that this program is providing value and as a secured global standards. So some of the key approaches in FAPI that we took is, one is the redirect approach, decoupled approach, embedded approach. So the redirect approach, as you are all familiar with the OAuth, but with a security feature by redirecting user to the authorization server for granting, providing grant. Most of the FAPI profile is focused mostly on the redirect approach. But we do have a support for a decoupled approach as well, because some of the jurisdiction requires decoupled approach where you may start your authorization process at the point of sale or your laptop, but complete on your iPhone or on your mobile phone. For embedded approach, some of the EU jurisdiction folks have proposed some use cases, and we are still evaluating the security properties and scope for best practices in that. At this time, it's mostly a conversation. We're actually not deep dive into this one. So this is coming up in future. Many of you are familiar with RFC 6749. It's an OAuth framework, and one of the problem in that one was to, the integrity protection of authorization request and response. As you can see that it's basically rely on a TLS, and most of the TLS within the from a client and the authorization server are all protected. But when it goes to the user agent, and that's where it gets terminated. To solve for that, FAPI has provided by doing the hybrid flow and request object. So you're mostly covered from a potential attack perspective. And most of this part is in FAPI 1.0 already. So more refinements are coming in FAPI 2.0, making implementation more simpler to implement. So these are some of the shiny tools coming in FAPI 2. Of course, starting with PAR, pushed authorization requests, enables resources, references, and scope and claims. And it also allows you to customize your authorization request parameters. And it will also include a RAR, rich authorization requests, enable fine-grained and complex consents model that are coming up. And consents are, the use cases that we are seeing in multiple jurisdictions to have user consent, different privacy, and use cases. I think this will really help in fine-grain those. In addition to that, we also have grant management APIs or grant management, which enables the state synchronization and lifecycle management along with the dashboard. So some of the jurisdiction especially in Australia and UK, we heard that the applications needs to provide a dashboard where user can actually go and see what consents they have done and what duration they have done, and also this has been added to that. And of course, the best security practices from OAuth security recommendation has been included in FAPI 2.0. So what will be the next in open data next? So we saw private API, open banking, cross-industry ecosystem. We feel that the next one is coming is a cross-jurisdiction ecosystem. As you see the examples of GAIN and GAIN 2 POCs, the Global Assured Identity Network. Some of these POCs and white papers that are getting published will really help into the direction of cross-jurisdiction ecosystem. And some of the white paper has covered potential use cases that we are seeing that we will be looking at it. Account information, how do we, cross-jurisdiction? I mean, if fintech apps sitting in developing in US can access account information in UK. Payment initiation, payee in confirmation, and identity. Some of these use cases we would like to cover. Of course, how will we achieve it? Reuse as much as possible. Global trust management, we're going to look at that, how that's going to pan out. New and simplified limited functionality APIs. As you know, data sets in every jurisdiction is different. I mean, in US, we call it a checking account. In UK, you'll be calling a current account. So how do we rationalize these? How do we map them? So we're going to standardize data sets with the lightweight APIs that can mean the same thing. More work is happening here where OpenID is providing forum for like-minded people. You're more than welcome to join the POCs that we have. So overall, global open data evolution, these are the places on the right-hand side we see the opportunity for standardization. I mean, of course, governance, we can't do much out there. But trust management, we do see that there is a need for a global trust management. There's a good opportunity there, but we have not made much progress there. Security profile, I think we have a well-developed security profile, and identity layer as well, are well-developed. API specification, as an overall API specification, we have not really landed there, but we do see that there is an opportunity there as well. API data model, we started some work. This is where that standardizing just the account type example. We'll be looking at some of the ISO 2022 usage, how they have done it. And some of this will be covered in the white paper as well. You have a QR code, and if you want to go deep dive into some of these white paper, With that, I'll conclude my presentation here. I'll ask Gail to close it.
Feel free to stay.
Sure.
And we'll open it to the floor and to the online group to see if there are any questions on what you've heard today or questions about the foundation as a whole. A little bit like what I had at business school, I get to cold call some of the board members that are sitting out there if Anoop and I don't have the answer, or we just want to pick on the board members. That's always fun. So any initial questions from the floor? Sorry, I see some hands going up. I think Christina is going to help us out. That's not fair, Don. I'm supposed to call on you rather than no.
I just had a quick question to Anoop. You have a unique situation because you're a leader of both the OpenID FAPI work, but also the FDX security work. Can you comment on how that's coming together or the challenges that you find in each of those two environments?
Yeah. So as you know, Financial Data Exchange is, short number, FDX is an open banking initiative in the US. We have a certified or actually pick up the FAPI 1.0 profile. We got approval from the membership to adopt that. So that all happened last year. And the focus right now is the adoption and implementation of it. Where we are seeing most of the work that needed to be done is the certification part of it. The thought process is, we have our own certification in FDX, and they are driving there as well. And how do we correlate these two together so that it can be a more comprehensive usage of OpenID Confirmance Suite as well as the data API that we have.
Yeah, we're big fans of coordinating those certification programs. If any of you are working with FTX, we applaud that effort. Yes?
Yeah, Alan Martin from Thales. I had a question coming back to the embedded authentication model that you briefly discussed. This morning we heard about SPC from Visa. And actually, secure payment confirmation is an embedded model running on the 3D secure rails. And so my question is, are you discussing with the W3C or EMVCo on how they're implemented this embedded model over 3D secure, and is this a source of inspiration to do something in FAPI?
We can definitely look at it. So far, what we have heard is this came from Europe jurisdiction as a use case. But if something is already been initiated, I will definitely would like to know. Maybe we can include that. But we have not come across that one yet.
So I was a little surprised to see consent management in FAPI 2.0. Is that limited to transactions, or is that general purpose consent management?
So you can define basically a granular level consent. You could go with duration and how long you want the permission consent to be. It will also go granular at the transaction level as well.
Any other questions coming online? Christine?
Nothing online.
Not online. Cool. All right.
Any other questions in the room?
Very good.
All right, thank you very much, Gail and Anoop.
Yeah, so
Thank
we'll,
you.
again, just invite you to come along to the plenary sessions tomorrow for the deep dives that we mentioned. So just to recap, those were shared signals and events at 9 o'clock. Then we'll go into OpenID Connect for verifiable credentials, followed by a brief on GAIN, and then 2 listening sessions where we really encourage a two-way conversation. So looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.